Hello, hello. Hi, everybody. I'm live again with one of my unschooling talks with number 20 today. Let's celebrate. It's the 20th talk on unschooling on my account. I'm so happy to talk with Shannon today. Hold on a second. I need to check my setup. And I'm waiting for her to join the call. And for everyone who is new to this call or to me, my name is Irene Kainz. I'm a mom of an unschooled son who is 13. Meanwhile, we live in Austria, and my son never went to school all his schooling career. And my intention for those unschooling talks or homeschooling talks is to raise the awareness of the possibility throughout the world. Hold on a second. I want to raise awareness for parents that there are other options. Hi, Shannon. Hi.
Hello.
So cool that you're here. Hold on. I need to check this. My intention with those talks is to raise the awareness for parents that they can educate and raise their kids in so many different ways that do not necessarily include schools. And this is why I'm having Shannon here today as well. Shannon, you are living in the United States. You have a number of kids. Would you like to introduce yourself with that, please?
Absolutely. Thank you so much for having me. This is so fun and so needed in our world right now. So I have 4 boys ranging from 6 years old to 23-year-olds. I live in Colorado in the States. And I have, like my older kids have graduated from homeschooling and unschooling combination. And one of my passions about this is really, I've been standing up for this long before like COVID and everything came out, because I believe that a lot of this is where we're going as more parents step out to be entrepreneurs and like free from like a lot of the matrixy type things that we have to find different ways of being. And part of that is, homeschooling our kids and allowing them to not have to go through the school system and kind of sit and wait and, be indoctrinated into so many things that are, one, not needed. I mean, simply, and they have to kind of detox from when they become an adult, and it creates, I mean, like for my kids, they became entrepreneurs. My husband and I also own some businesses together, and we've been longtime entrepreneurs, but I believe it all translates into more sovereignty for everyone, and really that new paradigm we're all waiting to kick in. It's all part of it to me.
Oh my gosh, you're speaking to out of my soul, and you're using actually very same words and thoughts than what I'm using a lot. So, I'm so happy and looking forward to this hour we have together now. You mentioned you did a combination of unschooling and homeschooling with your 4 sons. How do you distinguish between those 2 terms?
So homeschooling to me is kind of like an overall umbrella term. Like it can mean wild schooling, it can mean unschooling. Like it's basically, I use it when I don't know somebody is not in the know about all the multiverse of, like you're saying, around what is possible and things that you shift through. Honestly, to me, unschooling is using more resources, like our curriculum that we used when we started out homeschooling, for instance, which is a beautiful Waldorf curriculum, but it was just a little bit too constrained. it became our resource when we started unschooling, which is more freedom based on how your kids learned, which my three older boys that I started out homeschooling with, when my oldest was 4, and then I had a 3-year-old and a 2-year-old, because they're a year apart each, is really interesting because that unschooling gave them that freedom to, they each have their own learning style. My oldest did not want to learn to read. Like he was like, like feet up, like, no way, I will not read. And so unschooling allows you the freedom to work with how your kids are built, how they actually learn. And then we had a lot of different curriculums and a lot of different resources, honestly. And there were times that we didn't school at all. It was like strictly unschooling, learning by cooking, learning. We have a ranch and homestead, so it was learning by counting cows, and things like that. It was very organic learning. Whereas then sometimes in the winter here in Colorado, where we get snow, it was more our book resources, but I would set up like stations for them where they were multi-grade. Like I didn't grade them necessarily. I literally would put them, out options, and then sometimes they'd use them, sometimes it wasn't. And as they got in high school, unschooling turned into them learning through what they were passionate about. So like, for instance, my second oldest, he loves like war and strategy, and I'm sure he was in a past life, he was some general or something. He definitely has that energy. He's very peaceful this lifetime, I'll say, for the most part, until somebody, threatens somebody he loves. But he learned everything. He learned math. He learned English. He learned social studies. Like everything he learned through that war lens and that strategic type thing. So it allows them to do that, which encourages them to be who they are and to know who they are and to love to learn, which is literally when I set my intentions for homeschooling my kids, that was my intention. Because I believe that if my kids can learn and they know how to learn, if they can love that process, they can learn anything they want. Whether they go to school, they go to college, they do anything.
And also, I mean, what really lies close next to that, what you just said, is when they learn how to learn, which is very different for everyone, really, they learn who they are. And this is the most crucial part I don't see happening really in schooling system. Neither my experience was like that, nor I see kids nowadays. They don't learn who they are in school. They don't have the option. Even the other way around, they have to dismiss a lot of parts from what makes them unique to be able to fit into the system, right?
Yeah, and that's part of my third oldest was just saying over the weekend, actually, he was like, it's so interesting because all these, kids my age, which he's 21. So he's talking about young adults. He's like, I feel like a fish out of water. And all my older kids have always been like more mature, more advanced, more, like braver, like, in their, like how they put themselves out there in life. And I think it's because they know who they are, and it drives my kids kind of crazy. Like my third oldest was saying, like, that kids my age are still trying to like be college kids and kind of like, high schoolers kind of somewhat and be under their parents. And he's like, they still have another 5 years before they even begin to realize who they are. And he's like, we have our own businesses. We know.
What do they do? What kind of businesses do they have?
So my oldest, he owns a trucking company and an asphalt paving company. My second oldest, he actually
help me out. I'm not sure if I'm like familiar with those terms. Trekking in kinds of like
trucking. So like he owns a fleet of dump trucks. So he hauls gravel, and
Oh,
does
great. Okay.
yeah, and does excavation. Like he has large
Mm-hmm.
equipment. He does driveways and foundations and things. And then he
Wow.
also owns like an asphalt company where he can go back and pave the road with asphalt. Um,
Wow.
yeah,
Well,
so
this
and
sounds
he's owned
like
a
a
logging company. He's done logging before, but my oldest actually graduated. This is the beauty of unschooling. He was a sophomore, like just started into a sophomore year, and he comes to me and he says, I'm kind of done with school. And I'm like, all right, you know, it's him. He's very much like a leader and knows what he wants. And I'm like, well, what do you think you're going to do? Like, do you think you're done with school? No, I think I need some more schooling. And I'm like, okay, so let's set a plan. Like, these are the things that I feel, based on my knowledge, like that you should know before you graduate, um, high school. So he says, okay. And he says, so if I get those done in a month, I'm done. And I'm like, baby, if you get them done in a month, you're good. Guess what? A month later, he like literally did nothing but eat, breathe, sleep, school for that month, which is very unusual for him. He read, I don't know, like 15 different books. Like it was insane. And he's like, okay, I'm done. I'm going to start my own business. He started his own cattle herd.
mm-hmm.
We own a ranch, and my kids have been very into 4-H, which is like an agricultural organization here in the States. And he started his own cattle herd, like breeding cattle and selling beef
Wow.
from the cattle. He became a junior volunteer firefighter and went through the
Mm-hmm.
training for that, which is pretty intense, and started actually volunteering in the community. And then he started his logging company first. That's how he started. He bought logging trucks and was actually logging. And it was funny because I think he was 15, I want to say. So he couldn't even drive them himself. He didn't have a driver's license
Wow.
because you have to be 16 here in the States to get a license. And so, yeah, he started it and had to hire guys to drive for him and things. But he taught them, on the ranch, they learned to drive very early, four-wheelers and such, and tractors and things. So he's had his business for multiple years, and he actually chose, like, he was in football, like my kids played sports. But he actually was like, yeah, I just don't, like, I feel like it's kind of wasting my time. It's not fun anymore. I want to do these things. And so he went right into that. So, he's been the longest entrepreneur of the three of them. The other two kind of did like the normal approximation, like till, their normal graduated time that most kids graduate high school. They took the slower route. But my second oldest he takes care of our family's hay fields. So he does all the work including deliveries. Like this weekend, he just took hay to a different state and delivered and things. And that's really his passion, is that side of agriculture. And then my youngest, he is a project manager for our construction company. And he has a business on the side from that where he flips cars. So he'll take in cars that need work and fix them up, or snowmobiles and all kinds of things. He's a mechanic. So he applies himself that way. And like it was really fun over the weekend. We just looked at a brand new truck for him. And he's like, well, if I don't get a loan, it's okay. Well, I'll just pay cash. And I was like, and he's 21, and the guy there was like looking at me like, how old is he? And I'm like, I know, it's unusual.
Wow. That's so cool. You must be very proud, aren't
I
you?
am, but I'm most proud that they really do have that sense of self, and they have really strong values, and it doesn't matter what comes up. We've had some situations where, their friends have gone through things, and one of the things about my kids is that they know who they are, so they know who their people are, and they're willing to go, to the ends of the earth for their people, and they have that reciprocated. They have like a different level of relationship than most kids who are just partying. And my kids party. I'm not saying they're like not young adults, but they don't do it all the time, and they have like a whole different relationship, and they have very different. I think one of the things about school that drives me crazy is that kids are put in the same class with the same age people.
Mm-hmm.
And so my kids growing up with, 4-H was one of their like ways they socialized. They had monthly meetings, and they have a big event, our county fair every year, where they get to show off their animals and all the things. And there's so many ways that they get to speak with and make relationships with other community members in our ranching community and beyond, that my kids, like my oldest, when he sells his services for his trucking business, he has no qualms if somebody's 60, if they're 40, if they're his age, he makes has no fear over it. And I see that a lot with kids, where they're like so reserved, or they kind of want to stay with their own kids, or even kind of reject their parents because they're not in that. And that's another thing with my kids, is that we do a family dinner. Like, we all go out to dinner, including my the grandparents, every week, so that we all can. Since my older kids started moving out of the house, we made sure to connect every week on a regular basis, because our family is really important value-wise to us. And with my little one, he needs that time to see his big brothers and grandparents. And it's really funny, because they'll bring friends, or people that work with them, even to family dinner sometimes, because we're pretty inclusive. And they're always like, you choose to go out with your parents, they don't make you. And my kids are like, we have to go to family dinner, that's what we want to do. And it's such an interesting thing to see how I I believe it comes from, my kids have not been in school really, so, but I believe it also kind of breaks down that family closeness, where I have a
Mm-hmm.
very different relationship with my kids, because I've been home, because I haven't put anything between us, and
Mm-hmm.
also let them have all those other ideas from kids and teachers, and all those other values, kind of, not that I'm sheltering them, but they haven't had all that to process either, which at their cognitive ability, they shouldn't have to have all that to process, really.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'm seeing that a lot here as well. And I mean, there was a time when there were so many parents coming to me with the problem of their schooling, um, day-to-day life, when, I don't know how this is in the States, but here in Austria or in the German-speaking countries, they have this homework they have to do at home, and more or less the parents are responsible that the kid the next day goes into school with a done homework, so
Mm-hmm.
it's kind of, you can't, if you're doing this, you can't really live the relationship with your kid, because you're instrumentalized actually from school
Mm-hmm.
to force something that maybe this kid doesn't want to do, and the parents most of the time don't really either. So, and they still do it, and what really happens through that is the relationship gets cracked.
Mm-hmm.
This is the trust becomes an issue from the kid, of course, to the parents. What gets trusted here? Is it the being and instrumentalized from school, or is it the relationship to the kid even more? What's the value here? So
Mm-hmm.
I've seen that a lot as well, and I think this is a very important topic. A lot of parents don't see how much effect this actually has on their relationships to their kids. What I'm interested, Shannon, is, did you always see it coming like it came? Did you always know that it was turning out well, and even that well? And how was the path until you knew, you really have done the right thing?
I will say that I had more doubt than anything else I've probably ever done. Of course, having three boys in 3 years with all different learning styles and stuff, like, I feel that I was put more through the gamut than a lot of parents that have, like, a couple kids that are 2 or 3 years apart. But I met lots of resistance. And of course, we're talking, let's see, when my oldest was 4, we're talking like 19 years ago, right? Before COVID, before there's been all of like these beautiful talks that you do. And, I'm seeing more and more women speak up. I know in a lot of like my author circles, I have a lot of authors now that are homeschoolers as well, and they're speaking up and they're, identifying, talking about it more. So we're talking a long time ago when this is really unpopular, when most states here in the States had rules and, about kids being tested, about kids being vaccinated still. I mean, like, there was a lot of kind of overreach from the schools, I'll say, or trying to overreach. And it also, I believe, like my husband's parents, for instance, they're the older generation, they were very unaccepting. So when I started, I was so doubtful. Even my husband was like, I don't know that we should do this. This is different. This is like, can't we just put them in school? Can't we just go the easy route? Like, let's simplify, and then his parents were a whole nother deal. My parents were even bigger deal. Like, it wasn't like our family was like, oh, you're going to do this? How can we support you? Which is what I really feel should happen, no matter what the parents' choice is. But it was a real struggle because, like, my oldest did not want to learn to read. And of course we started off with a beautiful little Waldorf curriculum, that I thought we were going to homeschool. It would give me kind of like that, like, evidence that I was moving, that I was going on the right path, that I would end up in the right place, like that whole thing around the curriculum. I felt like it was kind of like a bridge for me. Like, I can't fully just, like, I don't know enough. I didn't even like embody the homeschooling mom enough to know. And this curriculum, I would say now would be kind of considered wild schooling. I mean, Waldorf is very nature based. So we spent loads of time outside besides the ranching things and the curriculum and stuff. But I mean, pretty much every day I was like, is this going to work? Is my oldest ever going to read? And then I had my middle child who,
Can I just
yeah,
ask, because this reading thing, this
yeah,
is such a common thing as well, especially with boys. And in my observation, especially with boys who don't like to sit, who don't, are very physical. Is it one of those types? My son as well. So what was the story? How did he come to read? I guess he does read, right?
Yes, he does read. So interestingly enough, we tried to, like, put him in, I realized very, very soon. I was like, I've always felt with my kids when something is off, and this is a place I see most parents really trip up. When something is off, I would, like, observe it more, like, bring my awareness to it. And if it persisted, I would find some way to shift. And this probably comes from my entrepreneurial mindset where, if something's not working, you pivot. But I realized, like, it was not working. And the dynamics between my boys were not working because pretty much my oldest was setting the tone at the time, of course, which I think all your oldest kids, no matter how close in age they are, do. And so my husband is very, very dyslexic. He's neurodivergent, is very dyslexic. And so, of course, our families who didn't like homeschooling were like, oh, he's dyslexic. That's why he's not reading. And I said, okay, we'll take him. We took him to an Orton Gillingham specialist. He pretty much corrupted her world because he's not dyslexic and did not like the formal setting of the sessions. Even though they were like an hour, he was not having it at 5 years old. So I pulled him out of that. After about a month, I was like, okay, enough of that. That's not working either. And I was like, okay, so all my kids learned to walk, right? Like, my oldest walked at 8 months. My third oldest walked at about a year. I mean, they all learned to walk. And I'm like, eventually he's going to read. That was my intuition. Like, I'm putting a pressure where is really no pressure. And so I started looking into like Rudolf Steiner and John Holt and a lot of those, those forebears of the principles that I really align with. And they all say, well, boys don't really like cognitively be able to read until they're 6 or 7-ish. And I was like, oh, well, he's 5. Like, he'd like just turned 5. And I was like, okay, so he's just not ready. So we like literally just took all the pressure off. And this is kind of where I didn't know I was doing unschooling, but I started to pull away from our curriculum because it wasn't working. And so I started to give my kids like fun things to do, still teaching the basics, letters and making the letters, but it was very creative. I mean, we were like making rock letters. We were painting on rocks. We were, drawing, in the manure piles, we were drawing letters. I mean, like it was very creative. And right about 8 or so, one day he just started reading. And I mean, like reading full out, like many years ahead of his level. It just all clicked one day. And within about a week's time, he went from really not reading except maybe like little words, like sight words and things that he'd picked up, and to full out reading, and was like started to read like full books himself, like the Treehouse books and stuff. He was like, oh, this is so cool, I can read now. And he'd literally walk around and tell us that. And I'm like, alrighty then. That intuition was really helpful because the other way would have been hard.
And how old was he then?
I think it was just before he turned 8. It was in the summertime. So, I mean, it was a long time, I'll say, I mean, it took some doing. And of course, again, we were met with all kinds of resistance. But I mean, I really do feel that way. All kids are going to learn, and especially if they're motivated. I think it was literally his age. He was like, oh, I can't read it says on the tractor when the tractor's throwing me a code. And he was like, oh, I need to read.
Yes. Yeah. That's how I experience this as well. Especially those boys, they need a reason. They need a reason. They need to go somewhere with that. Just reading for itself is not appealing enough. That's what I find and find true and observe a lot. Yes. So the beautiful story. Thank you for sharing that with us.
You're welcome.
And you wanted to tell about your second son. I interrupted you.
Yeah, I was gonna say
story.
it's hard when you're homeschooling, to like, it would have been very complicated for me to hold my 3 kids in consecutive grades into their grade. Because like my second son, he actually read about the same time as my oldest, which he's only a year behind age-wise. But then math-wise, he was more with my younger son. He did not want to do math, and it didn't make sense to him. And so I feel that like having some of those unschooling kind of, like the freedom of unschooling allowed each of my 3 first boys to have the freedom to learn and not have like I experienced it in school where you're like, okay, so I don't want to learn today. Like, I want to go be outside, and I think as kids, they have more of that. And of course, boys, active boys, I mean, they would rather go out and split wood, firewood sometimes, and get all of their energy out than, come in and do a set day. Like, we're schooling from 8 to 12 or whatever. And
which definitely sounds very healthy to me.
Yeah. Well, and that's the thing. I mean, they're all very healthy. They're all very active. Our life, one of our friends is like, my kids need hobbies the other day. And I'm like, really? Like, I have to remind my kids that they have to rest sometimes because we live in the mountains. So we're always snowmobiling. We were just on an ATV this weekend, foraging herbs in the like high up mountains where it was snowing already, and like all of these beautiful experiences. And I'm like, yeah, so you want to like teach your kid to like make robots at your house, which is great for wintertime, but like get outside, like go do stuff, you know? So I think it's really it changes their whole perspective on life and how brave they are to do things.
Mm.
You know, like my kids are, something comes up and they'll be like, oh, I'll try that. And I'll be like, ooh, I don't know, you know, that's a big thing. And they'll be like, it's okay. We'll figure it out, you know. But they always know, they look at things always through that loving to learn lens where they're like, it's a learning experience one way or the other. And I don't ever know that I've said that to them exactly, but I've modeled it because
Mm-hmm.
I myself am a lifelong learner and teacher now. So, you know, it's kind of that that whole spectrum of us really embodying our values and the kids just picking it up to me.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. This is a very interesting part of this conversation I keep having as well. What do you think what is needed? What is needed to raise kids in your home environment without school or without even a curriculum? I mean, you know, just doing nothing. It's usually not doing anything, right? But what are the main the main aspects you think from your experience that that's needed for kids to, you know, to develop well?
Well, one, we always had some level of structure,
Mm-hmm.
even when it was very loose structure. I mean, we always had like livestock, so you know there were always chores in the morning. You always got up and went outside. We always sat at the table and ate together for our meals. That was like a non-negotiable until they were in high school. When we got to high school and everybody was kind of in their own interest, that kind of like lunchtime became, you know, if my second oldest was reading war books in his room, he might eat in his room. But I mean, for the most part, they kind of had like their own daily rhythm, no matter what it was. And I mean, my husband and I own 3 businesses together. So sometimes the rhythm was, well, we're going to town to help dad, and they were helping him. And that was part of, you know, the day. But
Mm-hmm.
I think it helps to have something. They always had like their 4-H meetings every month. They always had like things. So it wasn't like I've gotten asked this a lot since COVID. Like, do you just do nothing when you unschool? And I'm like, not even close. We do much more than most families do. You know, sometimes when they were playing sports, they'd have sports practice, you know, and things like that. So I think having some type of structure, I mean, I never woke my kids up. This is like something I've been beat up for before, but like we're entrepreneurs and our kids unschool. And part of the beauty of that is everybody gets to sleep until they get up, which is usually like by 7 at our house, but still like, I didn't go like, oh, everybody at 6 o'clock, you know, everybody's got to get up and go somewhere. And bedtimes, we let them pretty much from pretty young on choose. I mean, we did have the conversations like, hey, you look really tired today. You know, do you feel like you need to read or do you feel like we need to go to sleep? I mean, we'd help them with their self-awareness. And if they didn't sleep and they woke up and were tired, we're like, oh, you get to, you know, read more today in bed or whatever they want to do. I think a level of respect is really important, and
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
respect not only for themselves and their family and like the kind of the normal things we think about, but respect and reverence for our planet, for the animals. I mean, like there's so much I've been able to teach my kids about being connected in to things. I'm also like an herbalist and aromatherapist and energy healer and things from long before I had kids. But having that respect changes how they operate. So they respect their own bodies. So most times they'd make really great decisions to not stay up all night, even though they had
Mm-hmm.
that choice.
Mm-hmm.
they made choices to like go pick up trash alongside the road in 4-H and do community service a lot. My kids would have like hundreds of hours of community service because they felt that that was part of like the reciprocity. I mean, they didn't say it that way, but like giving back. And then like my oldest and my third oldest now are volunteer firefighters. And like I said, my oldest has been since he was a junior firefighter a long time ago. Gosh, he's been a firefighter almost 8 years now. But like that's all part of that kind of respect and reverence and feeling that connection because of that respect and that reverence, if that makes sense. And then I think you have to really model like that parent embodiment. Like if I was not okay with it, I think there would have been a problem. Like I was like the bearing for everybody, even everybody that resisted us. And then because I was always modeling, like, I'm going to work now, I'm going to learn now, because I'm constantly learning too. And now I'm going to rest. I think my kids learned a lot. And I know as they got older, before like my oldest started his own business, for instance, he would come lay in my room at night on the floor next to me and want to talk about things and want to pick my brain about what was possible. I can't tell you how many hours of talks we've had about what's possible, why you do this in business, why would you move that way in business, how do you, make sure that you're supporting yourself and thinking about your community. And so I think the parent really being embodied, and I really do love Rudolf Steiner and John Holt's work. It's been really helpful for me to drop in, coming from the raising that I had and the schooling that I had, which was it was just awful. My school experience, it really helped me to drop in. Even our curriculum, our first curriculum that we used, had a lot about like how kids learn, like how to use story, for instance. And now I own a publishing company, so like it all makes sense to me why I was attracted to that one. But like how to use story and, how to, use the seasons and, like how to help them have that North Star within themselves. So those are 3 things I think are really important and kind of negate a lot of the other problems that can come up and the challenges that can come up.
Thank you. That's a beautiful answer. Yes. I'd like to talk about your 4th son. You have a young son, and and you told me a little bit about him. Would you tell me? He has he's neurodiverse. You said, right? And he just started with his schooling experience. Is that right?
Yeah. Well, we've actually been. So he just turned 6. We've actually been homeschooling for about 2.5 years now, or technically unschooling, for about, and I let my kids lead. I've always let them lead in the schooling department. So I had a lot of people, even with him, who are used to us, being an alternate way of schooling, come back and say, well, wait a minute, you're starting him too young and, you're pushing. Because I guess that's a thing now where a lot of parents are like homeschooling early so that their kids can like jump grades going into school and stuff. And I'm like, yeah, no, that's not me. I've done this long enough to know that it's much better when the kids lead. And we were reading like 4 hours a day, like where I was like, baby, I got to stop. I need to get up and stretch my legs. I need to go outside. Or sometimes we were reading outside too. But I mean, it was that kind of thing. And I was like, we're just going to like start providing you resources and start, providing you fun things to play with, to have letters. And he is neurodivergent. He actually has a rare form of autism, but this form of autism is interesting because it has a lot of like the undercurrents of autism, except that they're highly social and highly empathetic and sensitive. And so it was missed for a long time. We've only known about it for a few months. And so we decided at the beginning of this year, which is challenging for me to identify for so long as like a very much a disruptor and believer in like school and you know the children's sovereignty. I found a beautiful little Waldorf school, and about an hour from our home, from our ranch, and I had to like come to terms with it myself, but I took him over there and he was so excited to see the kids. He's only been in it a few weeks now, but he goes a couple mornings a week for socialization. I was very upfront with the school. I will always be responsible for my child's education. That is something I believe that we are responsible for in all forms, academically, personal development wise, emotional intelligence wise, like all of it. I believe that that's the parent's responsibility, no matter who we share it with. And so I was very clear with the school, who was a little resistant because I don't think they've ever had anybody come to them and say, so my child needs socialization. I will continue to homeschool, and he is grades ahead because he's actually more like in like second grade-ish stuff already. And I put him in kindergarten with his actual, and they have, Waldorf has mixed grades. So there's several different age groups in that classroom. You know, and so they actually listed us, and there's so many things like this that I wish more parents knew about. So I literally told them, like, if it's snowing, it's far from our house. We live in the mountains. I'm like, I'm not bringing him to school. And, you know, if he wants a break, I'm pulling him for 2 weeks or a month or whatever he needs. Like, this is not school to me. And the director was like, okay, so we'll mark him as an independent student. And that way, it's an independent school, but they literally marked him down as a homeschooler going to school so that if I pull him out for 2 months, the state won't even care. And there's all these little loopholes, but nobody wants to talk about them because the schools don't like them because they lose funding and whatnot. But it's amazing to see, like, when you advocate for your child, whether it's a little tiny Waldorf school or if they want to try public school, which my older kids have done, for like 4 days or a week at a time. I mean, it's been very minimal because they were like, why would anybody want to do this?
We had 1 day of experience. We had this too.
Yeah.
1 day, and we never talked about it anymore.
Yeah, that's pretty much my kids. Like at middle school, all three of them wanted to try, which lasted between the three of them. It was a like 2-week thing all together. And then my oldest wanted to try high school, but he tried it for 4 days. On the fourth day, he's like, I just walked past everybody and security and all the stuff. And I'm sitting on the outside bench and I'm never going back in there again. Those people don't like children. You know, they think we're all dumb. And he was like, why do kids like high school? Like, he was so, and of course he was on the football team, you know, which started before school. So I think he kind of wanted to like see if it was like all the kids, you know, why they liked it so much. And I was like, baby, I think it's actually because they're bored. Like, they're bored in the summer because they don't, you know, like that's their social life basically when you go to school. And then, you know, summer becomes this kind of like blow off time. And so they're looking forward to seeing people and having something to do. But yeah, so it was very short lived. It actually took me much longer to withdraw him than it did to enroll him or anything. It was kind of funny. I was like, yeah, let's not do that again, please. Sorry, the lights shifted for me. So yeah, my youngest is doing really well there, but he actually is almost spurred on to learn more. So now he's coming home and we're still learning 3 or 4 hours a day, depending on the day, because he's activated by the socialization. So it's so interesting to see when you're aware of your kids' rhythms and what they're needing, you know, and I find this for most neurodivergent kids. They're very activated. They have to be, and maybe it's all kids. I mean, could be very well all kids. I mean, there's, you know, mental stimulation, I can't talk.
Stimulation.
Stimulation there. I'm coming up with my own words now. That learning, they need to be activated into. They need the physical
Mm-hmm.
stimulation. They need the connections, the
Mm-hmm.
emotional connection. There's so many things that are overlooked at school.
Mm-hmm.
Like the physical aspect of it. They get a little bit of PE, which they don't want to do anyway, generally. Um, where my 6 year old will come home and he will go out and, run around with the dogs and the chickens and things. And he'll want to come back inside and learn after he's been at, his little school for 4 hours. So it's really interesting to see that it doesn't, it can work. I know that there's parents that like after school and we've actually tried shared schooling, which is a thing here where you can go like a couple days a week to school in the
Okay.
public schools, um, which is, again, my oldest tried, I think, for 2 days before he decided that that was not for him. But it's mainly for like specials, like music and that type of thing.
Mm-hmm.
But I mean, there's so many different ways that you could go at this. The biggest hangup, I think, is in our society. I don't know over there, but in our society, school has become like free daycare, like, childcare, where parents don't even like think beyond it because they need somebody to watch their children.
Mm-hmm.
And this is where I think that they kind of like don't take responsibility. They don't find the solution their child may need, in lots of situations. And I think it is really holding them back. Like my husband and I both being entrepreneurs, we've been able to, like when the older boys were younger, we had hard times. There's challenging times no matter what you do when you homeschool. And like for instance, when my boys were like the end of middle school age, we went through a phase where they were like, "We're done schooling." And we were like, "Yeah, that's not possible." But we came up with a way. Like sometimes my oldest would go to work with my husband and work on the construction site because we own a construction business. Um, or sometimes one of them would go with their grandparents for the day. And my father-in-law's a realtor. And so they would go sit in his office and draw and, do things with him. And so, like we had to come up with creative solutions. Even now, I have to work in the, like when I do my live calls for my online businesses, my husband has to watch my 6 year old after he comes home from, working construction all day. But there's such a way through it if you, have that knowingness that there is that way, that
Mm-hmm.
there is the possibility. And you have, I mean, even for single parents, I've seen lots of single parents who, like co-op, they'll take each other's kids and, like one day one will school them, one day the next will, or, find creative solutions. And we've also been part of a couple homeschooling groups, um, which were really beautiful. And we lived, we went to do a big construction project in another state, and they had the most beautiful homeschooling situation. It was a big city, and they had a day in the park that was all day, every week, the same day. And pretty much there was like 500 families that were part of it. It was massive. And it was all grades. I mean, there was babies to grandparents who came. And some parents and grandparents and some retired teachers would come and teach things to the kids, no grades, just classes, just open, like in the park. The kids would play, the parents could, work through what was happening at the time and get ideas from each other as this beautiful solution. So there's just, I think that's a really big thing for
Mm-hmm.
anybody who's in homeschooling or, kind of, it's on their radar, is knowing that there are like hundreds of ways to do this.
Yes, definitely. And you have such a good point. That the main intention, I think, from our society for school really is not educating the kids, but having a daycare,
Mm-hmm.
having daycare. This is really why it's so convenient, and a lot of parents don't really have a second thought about it, because they don't see really how they could do their lives differently if the system wouldn't work. But it's really not. I don't feel that the main intention is the education, really. It's just what the layer above, what the so what is the situation with schooling right now in the US? Ever, has anything changed ever, the last 2 years? I mean, probably here in the German-speaking countries, the idea of homeschooling became much more popular in the last 2 years. I guess this was the same in the States, right?
Absolutely.
And how did it develop after? I mean, we don't really know what this fall and winter brings, but I mean, we do feel, I guess, that the peak of everything is already behind us.
We'll
You don't
see.
think so? Okay, what's
Our
your feeling on that?
our government is trying to push some very scary ideas for the future right now. Which again, like, I don't watch the news. My kids don't watch the news. They will look at the local paper. We live in a very small mountain town, so they will look at the local paper for certain things, but we try to stay out of kind of that rhetoric and, but I would say, since honestly, I don't feel our schools are very good here, and we have several family members in a big city across the state and another state who are teachers. So we have a little bit of like kind of inside knowing. Also, not loving homeschool, either one of them, because they feel that homeschooling takes away. Like, there's that whole thing here in the States where, every child that's not in school is taking away from schools succeeding and having money, because our system is so based on all the hands that make money from the school system. But when COVID hit, it was really interesting to see. I literally got, and I mean, we're longtime homeschoolers, so I literally got like 120 some messages overnight when they closed our schools here. And I continue to get them to this day, like not as many, but and the messages were so sad to me, because a lot of them were like, how do you stay home with your children? Like, how do you mother like this? Like, it's too intense. And we had a lot of that here, I think, because there's this big disconnect with, being away from each other. Even spouses were having, I mean, they're saying the divorce rate was insane and whatnot, because people were actually having to engage in the relationships that they had agreed to, but I think weren't fully invested in a lot of ways. So that was a big question. And then, of course, like, how do you homeschool? What curriculum do you use? Like, how do you do this? And our state was providing some online schooling, but it was not great. And it pretty much, to me, was our already poor school system what just started stepping down further and further. And we see it still. We see a huge we go to the hot springs here in the town closest to us. And it's funny because when my 6-year-old was littler, we'd rarely, like before COVID, we'd rarely see another homeschooler. Like when you're talking to parents, it was always either younger kids or after school kids. And now almost every time we go, we meet another homeschooler, because so many people are pulling their kids because they've actually like dipped their toe in the water of what's happening at school. And I think here it's a lot of the political stuff too, because they're letting a lot of teachers kind of teach their own agenda, teach their own like political agendas, especially with a lot of the movements that have happened here, especially that have been kind of hyped up since COVID and all the COVID fears. And so we have people who are very religious saying, nope, that's against my values. I will not have that. We have people saying like, wow, that's not exactly what I thought it was, or that's really terrible, or they're actually looking at how the schools are doing, or they got to see how their kids actually were handling life while they were home for COVID, I think is a big one. and got kind of reconnected with their kids. And then we're like, what am I putting them in? And had that like little bit of awareness of, oh, wow, they're really unhappy. And I know I had a lot of reach out too when our schools opened back up and they were like fully masked. And a lot of parents were like, I don't want to mask my kids. And they know I'm very much a rebel and disruptor. And so they were like, what are the rules around this? Like, what can we do? And the next question was like, why are we going back into session with, the limited resources they have, trying to add on more constraints to the kids, trying to make them sit at certain desks and only go to the bathroom less, and all the things they were doing. So I again saw kind of this resurgence of parents saying, no, I'm not going to do that. Now the schools are saying that they're declining because of the money, because more homeschooling kids are being pulled out. And I think it's happening even to some private schools and charter schools. But the public school system here is saying that it's because of us that they're failing. That the parents who don't go with the normal mainstream concepts and have their kids in school. But there's so much that's happened. I mean, I think even the teachers, we have a friend that, through our ranching community, she's been a teacher for almost 30 years. And during COVID, they said, oh, well, now you get twice as much work and we're cutting your pay. And she went, yeah, right. I'm going to go teach pods, homeschooling pods, and do what I want to do with the children, and bye. So I think they also have a lot of newer teachers, probably, because I'm sure that's happened. A lot of teachers have been like, where can I make money elsewhere? Because our teachers aren't paid anything. I don't know. Are teachers paid well there? No. I hate to hear that that's a global thing.
In Austria, there is the situation that there is, in the upcoming years, there are a lot of teachers retiring, and there are not enough youngers coming. So it will be interesting here too, because there is already a lack of teachers. And I've heard that there are not textbooks in every classroom anymore, that not,
Wow.
I mean, there is also financially and human resources, it's breaking down. I mean, I'm not sure how long it's going to take, but I think it's going to happen in the next few years.
Yeah.
It's going to be interesting.
I don't know. I have fairly strong beliefs about this, but I honestly believe that the school system needs to break down.
Yes.
And be revisioned and rebuilt. When my older kids were little, and I'm revisiting it again myself, I had tried 2 different times with some of the other homeschooling moms here to start what's called a Sudbury school.
Mm-hmm.
Do you know what that is?
Yes.
Yeah.
How was your experience with that?
Well, we had a very hard time here because we had too many chiefs in the kitchen with their own ideas. But it's an unschooling school for anybody who doesn't know. And it's it's kind of like our experience with our large city homeschooling group. Like, it's kind of a utopian concept to me. But I feel that like something of that nature, maybe not exactly a Sudbury school. I know there's 60 worldwide right now, because I just ordered the books to start one, honestly, that they provide you. But that type of school where it's like really community based, and it's not only community based, like small kind of central to separate communities, but also the community involvement is so high, which again is kind of like my kids have experienced with the 4-H agricultural community. But it really exalts teachers and mentors and elders and a lot of things in our society that are, I was raised by my grandparents, and so I'm always horrified at how most people treat older, elderly people. And my kids are, very much respectful of elders. We have indigenous tribes. We visit sacred sites a lot and things. And I've been a shaman for 25 years. So like they have a different kind of view of things. And it's really interesting because a while ago, my third oldest saw some elderly people loading their cart at the grocery store. And they went over, and he very respectfully didn't get like too close or anything, you know. He went over and he said, I would love to offer my help if I can help you. And both of them kind of, the older couple kind of recoiled, like in fear. And I was like, that, you know, we had the conversation about it, and they would not take his help. And I asked my son, I said, well, why do you think that happened? Because I watched it happen from across the parking lot. And he said, I think they think we're all punks, because most of us are. And he said, I think they're afraid of us. I think they feel so disrespected that, you know, they just say no. They don't know how to even, you know, relate to us anymore. And we see it so much over here. So that's one of the reasons I think like that type of schooling or something of that nature would be really, like, I think it would heal our society in so many ways. And then also allow, like, for me, I know so much. I mean, I've been permaculture gardening for 25 years and homesteading, and now there's so many people getting into that. And I don't teach it online or anything. That's like not my business, but I would love to be able to, you know, on my time frame, be able to go into a school and teach kids or parents or, you know, anybody who wants to learn what I
Mm-hmm.
know, you
Mm-hmm.
know. So there's so much beauty in like what could come out of a different schooling system like that, and
Mm-hmm.
also out of the reach of, for me, the government and people making money off of it, just like our prison system over here. It's like a money maker. People don't
Mm-hmm.
care. It's all
Mm-hmm.
about the money. And you know, I'm not against money by any means. I'm an entrepreneur, but you know, it has to be handled differently if we're going to create different societies and, you know,
Yeah.
a different world. There has to be some change. There has to be some breakdown. Honestly,
Yeah.
when COVID hit, I was not in fear at all. I was like really excited. And
Me
much
too.
to a lot of people's dismay, I was like, all right, so here it comes. Here we're going to have a
Mm-hmm.
breakdown. And
Mm-hmm.
of course, with our life, we were kind of untouched. You know, our construction business, we had a lot of kids that live with us. We always have extra kids that live with us, um, that have struggled in some way, that know my older kids. And pretty much everybody lived within our household that was working for our construction business. And we were working at a house that had no people, like, you know, the people didn't live there, and a secondary home. And, you know, I have my businesses online, and we homeschool, and like, you couldn't have told in our life that COVID hit, you know, but I was just very excited that things were going to change, and that
Yeah.
people were having more awarenesses and things.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, this is so beautiful. Your, you know, your perspectives on things, how it is and how it can be. And I kept saying for the last 5 years at least, or 5 years before COVID, that this school system, I only can see that it really needs to break down, because you just can't refine it. It's you know, you need to build something from the foundation new. It needs to be new from the foundation on. And I've never could imagined how this is working. I just knew it has to be like this, but I never had the idea how can it be. And then when COVID hit, it was like, okay, it's here now. Yeah, and we'll see it. I'm sure we will see it happen. Yeah. So thank you for your time, Shannon. This was such an inspiring talk. I'm really appreciate that you shared your wisdom and your insights and your presence with us. And yeah, thank you so much for being this light for so many people, as I can see and feel, who are now looking for new orientation. And thank you for that.
You're so welcome. And thank you for having me. This was so much fun. And I really love speaking about these topics. I think they need to be spoke about so much more. And those of us who have some experience or who are even just starting out and navigating it, I feel need to just keep sharing and keep, putting it out there as a new way and a new normal.
Yeah, yeah. Thank you
So
so
thank
much,
you.
and all the best wishes to Colorado, which I have a special relationship with. So all my blessings there, and have a good day.
You too. Thank you so much.
Bye.
Bye.